holding onto righteousness in face of horror. My life has always been full of extreme events with profound messages for the world and me to learn from. Candidly, if I thought the torment and suffering that I and others endure had no purpose or message to influence me or the world, I would feel so despairing and lost. I cannot fathom how anyone can exist without purpose or hope. Believing there is a greater good to strive for, that makes the difference, and will be recognized and eventually, at least in the afterlife, rewarded for it. I have been repulsed at the idea that there is no karma or righteousness in the world, and if I should ever believe that, I fear what I would inflict upon the world without an anchor or tether to good and the right would be incalculably destructive. If I lost my integrity and connection to the right, I fear my Father Silver Seaborn's vile wickedness and sale of weapons and illicit drugs would be small potatoes to what I would do were I evil like my father. The world did not need me to be wicked like my father, an apathetic, self-serving inflictor of cruelty to benefit himself. Instead, the world needed me to be a defender of good and righteousness. It has always been critical that I stay true to being good and pursuing righteousness as a core that defines my own value and brand, my identity. But I have often quipped, one negative outweighs 1,000 positives. Every time a traumatic event happens, it erodes a piece of my faith and of my hope that goodness can triumph after all. Each negative chips away at the stack of golden good times, and one negative is like a bomb that destroys not one, but 1,000 good times at once. It has always been important for me to manage negative experiences, and I have had a lot of them. So they cannot harm or hold me back. I have to be able to manage and control them. I learned to put my negatives in metaphorical bottles, corking them and storing them high on shelves that I would be able to forget. Suppressing negative emotions became a hallmark of my childhood and continues in my adulthood, albeit less often. My bottled negativity was supposed to suppress everything so that those emotions could not affect me, but I would still have the knowledge that I learned from them so that I could glean insight and avoid repeating those mistakes. On another topic, when I was a tween, my mother befriended a woman in Parents Without Partners, PWP, that was paramount to a gold digger. The woman had recently moved in with her rich man and wanted to make sure everything was perfect. He had a black pony that irritated the man, and my mother was quick to provide a solution and acquire another pony for free. She asked if we could take the pony off her and the man's hands. The man insisted the pony had value and that my mother could buy him. But money has always been short, and my mother had no intention of spending money on another man's animal that she was trying to help just to take care of it. But my mother was clever. She turned to the man and said, "Well, I could buy your pony and you'd be free of it, but then I would have to pay to take care of it, feed it, stable it, and so much more. No, you should keep the pony and pay for all those things yourself. You can keep paying it and be annoyed by it." The man knew my mother was right and he did not need the money. So he agreed with one catch. We could lease the pony for $1 per year so that he could take it back anytime he wanted, but we would use him and care for him as though he was ours. My mother agreed, and we had Blackjack, as he was named, for years. Blackjack was not a nice pony, even more violent than Thunderbolt. He would just stand still and not go anywhere when ridden. He was virtually unbroken. He was unrideable. With my bad experience with Thunderbolt, I had no interest in trying to teach him how to be ridden. I was not going to try to ride Blackjack and break another arm. No one wanted to take that risk. So Blackjack became a stable pet that very few people liked. Maybe no one liked. A friend of mine named Scotty Shaddocks, we'll talk on him later, joined me in a game that we discovered Blackjack liked to play. Tag. We would give him one sugar cube, which he loved. We would show him another sugar cube and run around trees, up trees, all over, and Blackjack would chase and follow us like a dog, seeking another sugar cube. The game became actually dangerous one day when Blackjack apparently had decided he wanted more sugars than one cube at a time. He bucked and he charged and he reared up and he literally treed us. We could not come down. He may as well have been a grizzly bear waiting for us. We eventually threw a bag of sugar cubes all over a wide area so he would scoop them all up, and we ran away to escape. We never played blackjack tag again. I was not interested in riding horses much anymore after all that. I could get hurt, or worse. Horses were mean. Horses think for themselves. They're wicked. They're bigger than people, and they can hurt people. I was afraid of horses after breaking my arm and wearing a cast for 6 months. My grandfather and mother thought I needed to get back in the saddle again, or I would never get over my fear of horses or riding or who knows what else that I might in the future fear. There was no encouragement or examples they could present that would sway me. A few years they convinced me this squat, rotund white pony with brown and gray patches across his face and body might be a safe pony to ride. He was gentle and well-tempered. My parents joked Patches seemed more like a small and slow mule than a horse. And so I rode that pony. He was nice. He was not threatening. He even seemed happy. He was happy someone liked him too. He was the opposite of Thunderbolt. I said it would be okay if we kept him. We had Patches for many, many years. I rode him in the foothills for hours at a time, would adventure up and down creeks, hills, and valleys. I even rode Patches to a neighboring city, Gilroy, and into one of their strip malls once. That drew attention. Another time I rode into a suburban housing complex in another neighboring city, Morgan Hill. While riding in the foothills, on my pony, he stepped on a duckling accidentally, crushing it under its hoof. I do not know why the duck was out on its own, but it managed to get beneath the hoof of my horse. It screamed and it moaned horrific sounds. I felt terrible for it, and I ran to find a large rock and use it to euthanize the suffering duckling so it might be spared its hours of suffering. I had no other idea what to do. I felt awful taking its life, but it was, practically speaking, already dead. I just spared the time it would hurt and suffer before it died, but it still felt bad. Patches and I were mates, and we went everywhere. But Patches got older, and I got bigger. Patches developed cataracts over one of his eyes, and then the next. He became so blind that he could narrowly see a few feet in front of him. I could no longer go on rides with Patches, and few others in the household would spend any time with him. Lonely and despairing, one evening Patches laid down in the back pasture and refused to stand up. Horses always stand up. They sleep standing up. The only time you find a horse laying around is when they are immensely hot, dehydrated, or sick. Patches was laying down with a clear indication that he was not well. Something was wrong. The veterinarian visited Patches and diagnosis was that he was depressed. A depressed horse. I had never heard of such a thing. It made sense. Patches and I were best buds, and we spent less and less time together as Patches was all but blind. Who wouldn't be depressed, isolated, and blind? The vet said he should be put down. That was horrifying. My parents said that he was costing money now, and the vet says he's not going to get better. So, they alluded, euthanasia. No! Cynthia and I both fed sugar cubes to Patches and shifts, brushed and pet him, spoke soft words to him. It got him to pay attention. and rise to his feet after a few days. I ranted and ranted that Patches could not be put down. And they decided to put an advertisement in the local newspaper to see if someone was interested in a blind pony as a pet that could not be ridden. Remarkably, a family in Morgan Hill had a little disabled kid that could not ride, but dreamed of having a pony. Patches had a new home. He was, metaphorically, put out to pasture, but this pasture, he could live out his days with a loving, disabled child. I missed Patches, and I saw him from the street sometimes in Morgan Hill when I passed by. I have fond memories of riding Patches, my pony, before he developed those cataracts and went blind. About an hour from our home is where he spent his time in the end. I would ride along the creek sides and sometimes in the creek when we had him, mostly through a few heavily overgrown areas on the banks of a creek. The area was full of dragonflies, bullfrogs, wasps, and all sorts of creek critters and bugs. Birds chirped, the bugs buzzed, frogs croaked, and the water rippled and rushed. Eventually, the creek opened into a man-made lake, which had previously been a giant percolation pond, but now was abandoned but still full of water. I would take Patches into the pond until he would swim, and I could hold on to his mane as he bore me from one side of the pond to the other. I must confess sometimes I wondered if he got scared or was just excited to be swimming. He did not shy from the shore whenever we came to it, so I concluded that he was at least okay with our swims together in that pond. As Pony, Patches, and Richard united as one. Given my experience with Thunderbolt and outgrowing Patches, I wanted to transition to the Iron Horse. I wanted to ride motorcycles instead of horses. We had no money to maintain and operate a motorcycle, much less buy one, I thought. But I had ridden a little Honda 50cc motorcycle at a neighbor's house, and although I drove right into and through their white picket fence, it was absolutely invigorating and exciting. I pleaded with my mother, asking if there was no way it could ever be that we could afford a motorcycle. Sam, my stepfather, pitied me and found a used Honda 55cc motorcycle like the one that I had ridden, but for cheap. It did not run well, but he got the manuals and we fixed it up ourselves as a hobby together. It was fun seeing Sam, a 250-pound man on a tiny little 50cc Honda motorcycle, testing it out. It was like a circus clown riding a tiny little bicycle. But it worked. After a year of proving I loved dirt motorcycles, Sam and my mother offered a contract of sorts to me. They would buy a brand new 80cc Yamaha motorcycle for me if I agreed to wash the dishes, wash the kitchen floor, and mow the lawn for 4.5 years. That would pay it off, they said. I wanted the motorcycle so badly that I agreed without much thought. I would have to do additional chores as well to get real money so I could buy gas and maintain the motorcycle. But I have never been lazy or one to shy away from work. I became a child indentured servant paying off my debt for 4.5 years, but I promised to do it and I did every single day without pause, complaint, or issue, sick or not, did not matter. I learned to maintain the bike and even rebuilt its engine once after it had a seriously bad breakdown. And when you have no money, you find resourcefulness inside you that maybe you didn't have or didn't think you had. With limited money, I learned how to maintain that motorcycle all by myself, changing oil, mixing fuel, cleaning, replacing spark plugs, cleaning, adjusting the carburetor, adjusting chains, clutch, brakes, cabling. I even rebuilt the entire engine once. I became a grease monkey by necessity, something that no one would ever think of me. Me, a grease monkey? I'm a techie nerd clean freak. I am far from a mechanic. Little do people really know. Although I was an indentured servant for my parents over those 4.5 years of washing dishes, the floor, and mowing lawns, just to buy that motorcycle, I enjoyed riding freely and escaping my life out into the country and the hillsides. I would ride for hours and hours where no one dared to go. If doubt anyone could reach a place, I strived to hit it and get there. I was insane in my willingness to go on arduous treks to crazy places. Once in the wilds of the foothills, I found a stolen pickup truck. Another time I found a stolen motorcycle, and there was a fire blaze my friend and I put out, preventing potentially a huge forest fire. Rarely I would travel far to a place at the base of a steep hill where water trickled down through a year into a cistern pond below. There was an old ruined castle in the area called Mount Madonna, and I would sit there or walk around and contemplate and think. It was there that I made my biggest decisions in my life. It was there that I decided to abandon traditional school and college and university and instead pursue making computer and video games independently and even against my parents' advice. One sunny day, I was cruising happily up on a hilltop on my motorcycle, but as I crested its peak, I saw a white pickup far away on a dirt fire road. Next to the pickup was a man holding a rifle. He was apparently shooting for fun in the middle of nowhere. Well, he decided it was a good idea to shoot at me, a live, moving target. Oh my gosh. I dumped the bike on its side immediately on the opposite side of the hill crest where I could see the shooter and where he could conversely see me and shoot at me. Bang and whiz, bullets zipped over and above me. Bang, bang, 2 more bullets flew. They struck the tree where I was near. I managed to drag the motorcycle on its side down the hill so I could jump on it, kickstart the engine, and get the heck out of there. It was an insane incident and one that made me question how anyone would feel it was okay to shoot at another person without any justification or cause. As an aside, there was another random shooter some time past that shot a woman that lived down the road from us in San Martin, destroying her jaw, ruining her life. That shooter was a young adult that thought he was going to scare the woman, but his aim was bad and he hit her in the face. He alleged that it was an accident, that he was aiming away from her, but he pulled that trigger. It was no accident. People can be wicked and cruel and malicious, even without the malicious intent. It became evident to me that you had to be super aware of your environment always around you, especially where people are and what they're doing. I could not trust the world around me to be safe. Riding horses and motorcycles in the wilderness gave me so much freedom and space to find peace of mind from my otherwise tormenting world. It gave me exercise, fresh air, sunshine, and adventure. Being free to ride anywhere without restriction was a blessing that I treasured. Sure, I had misadventures and mishaps riding horses and iron horses, but those experiences shaped who I am today and may have been instrumental in refueling my emotional batteries, so that I had the fortitude to overcome hellish conflicts and problems at home. My motorcycle and horse adventures were critical to my mental health and to my physical health. Psychiatrist assessment. Horses and iron horses. Dr. Garcia's iPad window flashed. Richard, I share Dr. Hyder's feedback from your experience with your pets. But for your life with horses, I am speechless. Envisioning the horrific image of your sister covered in blood from your pony Thunderbolt's head, falling back off its neck over her, and her crying there, gripping the pony's mangled corpse. The impact, the harm, incalculable. To your sister, but also to you and to your family. You declaring you had no friends and using your broken arm as a weapon is intriguing. It is unimaginable your mother threw you in the back seat of her car with a serious injury multi-location broken arm and drove you to the hospital with you having to hold your own arm in place as she drove? It is commendable that you spared the duckling from suffering. However, it is highly unusual for someone to have that swift of a decision, especially to end the life of another creature, even if it was mortally wounded and suffering. You turned to mechanical horses eventually to have control. That's telling. It is shocking that you were shot at as a kid. Of course, you were trespassing, it sounds like, and may have represented a threat to them. Naturally, they would shoot at you in self-defense. It seems you may have brought that difficulty onto yourself. Seeing yourself as an indentured servant to pay for your motorcycle is curious. Children have recurring chores. They may have allowances. They may have been given gifts and things. So why were you indentured doing your chores? It seems like you were fortunate to have a motorcycle, and that you were not a slave. It is fortunate that you are at least had some good experiences in your life that you remember, like swimming with horses. That sounded magical, quite special. Caselli interrupted. Excellent summary, Dr. Garcia. Richard, next time I'd like us to hear one of your recent flashback stories.